Okay, let's talk about that feeling. Like you're running faster just to stay in the same place financially.
Uh-huh. You see prices going up everywhere.
Right. Groceries, gas,
Right.
everything. And maybe that job security, it doesn't feel quite as, well, secure as it used to?
Yeah, a lot of people feel that way. And savings, they're just
Yep.
sitting there, not really doing much.
Exactly. It's a really common feeling right now. But what if there was a different way to look at it, a way to actually understand what's going on and maybe even, position yourself to benefit?
Okay, so like an edge.
Yeah, like a genuine unfair advantage.
Yeah.
And not just for the super rich, but maybe available to anyone who's willing to learn a new set of rules.
Hmm. Okay, stepping off that financial treadmill idea, it definitely resonates, that feeling of just watching things shift around you.
It really does. And that brings us right to our source for today's deep dive. You brought us Robert Kiyosaki's Unfair Advantage.
Yeah, and it's not your typical uh, dry finance textbook.
No, definitely not. It really goes after some fundamental ideas we have about money, about work, investing.
It challenges a lot of assumptions.
Totally. So our goal today, our mission, is to pull out those key insights, the stuff that can give you, our listener, a fresh perspective, maybe some actionable knowledge for building, better financial well-being, especially now with the economy being so unpredictable.
And Kiyosaki's whole point, really, is that this unfair advantage isn't about luck or having some secret insider info. It's about getting financially educated.
Right. Understanding how money actually works.
Yeah, he argues that understanding the system, the economic engine, can fundamentally change how you operate within it.
Now, for folks who might not know him, Robert Kiyosaki, he's the guy behind Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that massive bestseller.
Right, huge book.
And Unfair Advantage kind of picks up where that left off. It builds on those ideas.
Hmm.
And interestingly, he dedicates this book to people who step up and become part of the solution.
That dedication says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially now. It sets a tone. It's not just analysis, it's a call to action, almost. Individual empowerment through learning.
Yeah. And think about when this first came out, March 2011.
Okay, context is key here.
Definitely. You have to remember the backdrop. We were still feeling the effects of the '08 crisis. Kiyosaki saw it as a declining economy.
Right, lots of uncertainty, bailouts, stimulus.
And he talks about governments printing trillions in counterfeit money. That's how he refers to fiat currency.
That's strong language.
It is. But he says his reason for writing wasn't to brag about his own success. It was more about sharing the financial education he and his wife, Kim, got, how that became their unfair advantage.
So, less look at me, more, here's how you can learn too.
Exactly. He wanted to encourage people, like our listeners, to learn these principles and see the world differently, as he puts it, when it comes to money.
So that 2011 perspective, it's colored by the post-crisis anxiety, the debates about government spending, currency stability. That makes sense.
And a really core argument he makes, maybe a controversial one, is that many people act like, well, like monkeys clinging to job security, their possessions, and money.
Monkeys. Okay, that's memorable.
Well, it is. He believes it stems from a lack of financial education. And he says this leads people to become, in his words, wage slaves and tax slaves.
Oof. Strong terms again.
Yeah. He points straight back to the 2007-2008 crisis as proof. People desperately holding on to jobs, even as layoffs were happening all around, clinging to homes they couldn't afford.
Or saving more, right, even when inflation might be eating away at those savings.
Exactly. Saving more even while governments were potentially devaluing the currency. Or even going back to school, getting more traditional qualifications, despite maybe poor job prospects in those fields.
So the monkey analogy is about holding on to familiar strategies even when they aren't working anymore. That fear of letting go of the known.
That's how I read it. Clinging to the branch, even if the tree is shaking.
And he contrasts this with the shift from the industrial age to the information age.
Right, the old model. Job security, maybe a pension.
That was the goal.
Predictable, stable, or at least it seemed that way.
But now, information age, technology replacing jobs, traditional career paths becoming, well, less certain. Obsolete in some cases.
Yeah. And he points out the U.S. becoming the biggest debtor nation, putting strain on social programs, too.
So the whole economic landscape is shifted under our feet, according to him. The old rules don't apply.
And here's a really critical point he makes, a real departure from standard thinking. He pinpoints 1971.
Okay, Nixon taking the dollar off the gold standard.
Exactly. The moment the U.S. dollar stopped being directly backed by gold and became, as he calls it, an instrument of debt.
A fiat currency.
Mm-hmm.
Its value based on government decree and trust, not a physical commodity.
Right. And Kiyosaki argues this had a massive consequence. Savers became losers.
Because?
Because the dollar, since 1971, has lost something like 95% of its purchasing power.
Wow, 95%. That's huge.
It's staggering. So that monkey we talked about, clinging to their savings account.
They're holding on to something that's melting away in terms of what it can actually buy.
That's his point. Think about it. For every dollar your grandparents might have saved back then, 95 cents of its buying power is just gone. That fundamentally changes how you should think about saving, doesn't it?
It absolutely challenges the save your pennies mentality that many of us grew up with.
Mm.
If the money itself is losing value, just accumulating more of it might not be the smartest move. You need to understand why it's losing value.
So while Kiyosaki doesn't explicitly say, this book is for X, Y, and Z, you get a really clear picture of who he's talking to.
Yeah, you can feel it.
It's people like, well, probably many of our listeners, people feeling that economic pinch, that uncertainty, people actively looking for answers, for knowledge.
People who want to understand the bigger picture without getting lost in complex jargon, maybe.
Right, and looking for those aha moments, those shifts in perspective.
He's definitely speaking to anyone who senses that the standard advice, go to school, get a job, save money, invest in a 401k, maybe isn't the whole story anymore.
Yeah, if you're feeling that disconnect between the advice and the reality, he's saying, hey, pay attention.
If you're asking those tough questions about the future, like, what will things cost? What's my money actually going to be worth?
Exactly. He draws that contrast. The people asking critical questions versus the monkeys just following the herd without questioning if the path still makes sense.
So the act of questioning itself is part of gaining the advantage.
Seems like it. Not just accepting things at face value, critical thinking about finance.
And he does make some pretty bold promises about what the book delivers.
He does. He
Yeah.
says it'll show why saving, in the traditional sense, might be foolish now.
And crucially, what to do instead.
Right? And also, how to spot potential investment opportunities before everyone else jumps in. Getting ahead of the thundering herd, as he puts it.
Which implies potentially better returns if you get in early. Those promises are designed to grab you, to suggest there's a smarter way.
And it all circles back to this idea. Financial education is the key. Understanding how the system really works.
Like how banks can effectively create money through lending,
Mm.
the fractional reserve system.
Yeah, understanding that and how, if you learn the rules, you can potentially use the system to your advantage too, not just be used by it.
Moving beyond just being a pawn on the board to understanding the rules of the game, that's the core of the unfair advantage idea, isn't it? Understanding the principles.
Exactly. So let's shift into some of the practical stuff, the actionable insights from unfair advantage. He starts by contrasting traditional education with, well, non-traditional education.
Okay, so school versus something else.
Kind of. He
Yeah.
talks about his poor dad, highly educated academic guy who believed strongly in traditional school professional careers.
The path that leads to being an E employee or an S,
Mhm.
small business self-employed, in his cash flow quadrant.
Right. And Kiyosaki isn't saying traditional education is worthless. He gets that it gives you specific skills.
Sure, you need doctors, lawyers, engineers.
Of course. But his argument is that it often doesn't give you the financial intelligence needed for true financial independence.
Okay, so it prepares you for a job, but not necessarily to build wealth outside that job.
That's the idea. He contrasts it with his rich dad's focus, which was on education for the big business and I investor quadrants.
B&I. And why the focus there?
Well, he points out that even high-income professionals in the S quadrant, like doctors or lawyers in private practice, often pay the highest percentage in taxes.
The tax angle again. A trap, he calls it.
Yeah, a trap his rich dad wanted to avoid by understanding business structures, investments, tax laws, things you don't typically learn in traditional school.
So different quadrants operate under different rules, especially regarding taxes. Businesses deducting expenses, investors getting different tax treatments.
That's a big part of it. He shares that story about his poor dad, the highly educated one.
The ice cream franchise.
Yeah, lost his retirement savings in it. Kiyosaki uses that as a stark warning, relying only on your job, and traditional savings can leave you vulnerable.
Contrasting that with seeking advice from his rich dad, who had a different perspective entirely. These stories make the concepts really concrete.
They do. So just to recap the quadrants, E is employee, S is small business or self-employed, B is big business, like 500 plus employees, and I is investor.
And traditional education mostly gears you up for E and S.
Right. which is where the non-traditional financial education comes in. That's the unfair advantage learning the B&I game.
Even if you have great grades and a high-paying ERS job.
Especially then, maybe. He brings back the monkey in a trap idea. People feel stuck because they only know the E&S rules. They don't see the B&I possibilities.
So being trapped by a limited financial viewpoint.
Yeah. Financial intelligence for him means learning what B&I folks know about earning more and, crucially, paying less in taxes legally.
That tax minimization is a huge theme for him. It's presented as a major benefit of the B&I quadrants, stemming from that different financial understanding.
And if you want to move into B or I, he says you absolutely need teachers and mentors who are already successful there.
Makes sense. You learn from those who've done it.
He uses the flight school analogy. You don't learn to fly from a theorist, you learn from pilots.
And if you want to be a fighter pilot, you learn from combat veterans.
Exactly. He criticizes traditional education for often lacking that real-world application and says the real learning, the crucial financial learning, often happens after you graduate.
That analogy really hits home. It highlights the need for practical experience and guidance, not just theory.
Then there's this advice from Rich Dad. Don't be average. Average investors make smart investors rich.
Ouch. So following the crowd is basically just feeding the pros.
That's the implication. He argues investing in your own financial education, understanding the how and why, is way more important than just picking the right stock this week.
That's a powerful shift. Focus on your own financial IQ first, then worry about specific investments. So practically, what does that look like? Taking courses, finding mentors, actively doing deals.
Yeah, all of the above, really. Kiyosaki himself talks about taking seminars, finding mentors for real estate, for business. It's about actively seeking out people who are doing what you want to do and learning from them.
Okay. Then he tackles security versus freedom.
Right. He argues they're often opposites now. Clinging to job security, the monkey on the branch again, can actually mean less freedom because you're dependent on that one paycheck, vulnerable to layoffs, economic shifts.
That's provocative. It challenges our basic instinct for safety.
Ugh.
Is he saying true security comes from adaptability and financial literacy, not just a steady job?
That seems to be the core idea. Relying solely on a job in this fast-changing information age is like, standing on shaky ground.
And then he really goes after some sacred cows of financial advice.
Oh, yeah. Like, invest for the long term in a well-diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds.
The standard advice from almost every financial planner.
He calls it potentially the worst financial advice, especially for the decade he was looking at, 2010, 2020, because of expected volatility and inflation.
Worst advice. Wow. Why?
He felt it was too passive, that people following it blindly would miss huge opportunities because they weren't understanding the bigger economic shifts.
That's a very contrarian take.
Yeah.
It's crucial to remember this is his 2011 perspective, right?
Yeah.
But it highlights his belief in needing a more active, informed approach, not just set it and forget it.
Definitely. We're presenting his view here, which contrasts sharply with mainstream advice. It encourages thinking critically about different strategies.
And then he drops the line, knowledge is real money.
Powerful, isn't it? The understanding you gain is more valuable than just cash, which can lose value or be lost in bad investments.
And learning from mistakes is key.
Absolutely crucial. He contrasts his rich dad seeing failures as learning opportunities versus his poor dad getting discouraged and blaming himself.
That mindset shift, seeing mistakes not as the end, but as tuition paid for a valuable lesson that's very entrepreneurial.
Yeah. He also distinguishes between financial training and financial education.
Okay, what's the difference for him?
Training is like rote advice. Go to school, get jobs, save money.
Wow.
Just following instructions without deep understanding.
Like Pavlov's dogs, he says. Or advertising conditioning.
Kind of, yeah. Whereas education is about understanding the principles, the why behind it all, so you can think for yourself.
Training tells you what? Education teaches you how and why. Like knowing the dollar isn't tied to gold anymore, education helps you understand the implications of that, not just the fact itself.
Precisely. And he stresses lifelong learning, but also applying it immediately. He talks about how he and Kim, right after getting married, started taking classes, real estate, business, whatever, and then immediately went out and tried to do it.
Learning by doing.
Yeah. He says Rich Dad taught him how to learn, how to analyze, not just what to learn.
That active application is vital, makes the learning stick.
Then he brings up his Cash HFL game.
Yes, the board game.
Yeah, designed specifically to teach these Rich Dad lessons in a practical way. Challenges you're thinking about income, assets, getting out of the rat race.
It simulates financial decisions. Right. Learning cash flow, investing in a safe space. I hear it's pretty popular globally.
It is. Then he revisits that classic, maybe controversial point from Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Let me guess. Your house is not an asset.
You got it. Not in the income-generating sense. He points to the 2007 crash as proof for many people who thought their home was their safest investment.
Still sparks debate, that one. But it forces you to differentiate between things that put money in your pocket versus things that take money out.
Right. And he shares a mindset shift. Periods of pessimism, market downturns like '89, like 2010, those are often the best times to start investing.
Buying when others are fearful. Contrarian investing.
Exactly. He talks about the struggles he and Kim had getting loans as entrepreneurs, but they kept finding creative ways to buy assets anyway.
That persistence, that different view of market cycles is key.
Yeah.
So we've hit on savings erosion, the risk of chasing capital gains, which leads to his main alternative, right?
Yes. Cash flow. He drills down hard on the difference between cash flow and capital gains. This is absolutely critical for him.
Okay, break it down.
Most amateurs, he says, focus on capital gains hoping the price of something goes up. Buy low, sell high. He calls this speculation, basically gambling.
Okay.
Whereas he and Kim prioritize buying assets that generate income every month or year. Positive cash flow.
Like rental properties, dividends from stocks, royalties.
Exactly. Things that put money in your pocket regularly. He even gives examples of how amateur investors talk, always asking, what's the price or did it go up, reveals that capital gains focus.
Got it. Build income streams.
Yeah.
Don't just bet on prices. He uses the monopoly analogy. Where
Yeah, it's not just about buying Boardwalk. It's about putting greenhouses and red hotels on it so you collect rent when someone lands there. That's the cash flow.
That makes it super clear. Rent is the cash flow.
And he argues that focusing only on capital gains makes investing stressful. You're always worrying about the market going up or down.
Makes sense. It feels risky because it's out of your control.
But focusing on cash flow gives you more control. You're building an income stream that ideally keeps coming, regardless of daily market swings.
More predictable, more stable.
He shares his first win, a small rental property back in 1989. It only made $25 a month positive cash flow.
$25. Seems tiny.
It does, but it proved the concept. It was an asset putting money into his pocket, not taking it out, the start of the snowball.
Okay, the principle matters more than the initial amount.
Exactly. And this leads to his definition of financial freedom. It's not having millions saved.
What is it then?
It's when your monthly cash flow from your investments is greater than your monthly expenses.
So passive income covers your living costs.
Precisely. He says they hit that point in 1994. $10,000 a month in cash flow with only $3,000 in expenses. That's freedom in his book.
That's a very tangible goal, not some huge abstract number, but income exceeding outgo.
Yeah. And he emphasizes doing this as a couple, setting goals together, continuously learning seminars, books, mentors, coaches.
Always learning.
He even jokes his first gift to Kim was an accounting seminar.
Huh. Okay, that shows commitment to the cause.
Right. So wrapping up the practical side, he says you basically have three choices.
Okay, what are they?
1, do nothing, just hope things work out. 2, rely on experts, the traditional buy, hold, and pray route.
Or 3.
3, invest in your own financial education. Put time in before you put big money in. Learn the principles. He obviously argues this is the smartest path.
That brings it right back to the start. Education is the foundation.
Exactly. Now, the book doesn't have a behind-the-scenes chapter, but it feels like it does.
How so?
Because he shares so many personal stories about his poor dad, his rich dad, the lessons learned, their own journey, Kim's journey, the struggles, the wins. You get a real sense of how their philosophy developed.
Yeah, those contrasting stories of the two dads are the bedrock of his whole framework, aren't they? It's very personal.
Definitely. And his style, it's engaging, right? Provocative even.
Oh, yeah. The analogies stick with you. Monkeys, flight school, Monopoly.
They make complex ideas easier to grasp. And those financial oxymorons he uses.
Like job security or saving money.
Yeah. They're designed to make you stop and think, wait a minute. Create those aha moments he talks about.
And he speaks very directly to the reader. It feels personal, like he's addressing your specific worries.
Totally. And the way he poses questions throughout. What if there's another way? Challenging buy and hold.
It's meant to be interactive in your head, right?
Yeah.
To get you thinking critically, not just passively absorbing.
Exactly. He's trying to spark that questioning process.
So if we were putting together show notes for this deep dive, what are the absolute must-haves?
Okay, definitely need to define fiat currency. Explain the cash flow quadrant, clearly ESBI.
Crucial difference. Cash flow versus capital gains. That's core.
Yeah. The monkey analogy, memorable shorthand for clinging to old ideas.
The whole traditional versus non-traditional education piece.
Right.
Investing in your own financial IQ.
Right. And maybe some examples, like his first 25 a month rental.
And the definition of financial freedom, cash flow exceeding expenses. That's inspiring.
Yeah, those would be key takeaways. Maybe also mention the need for mentors in B&I and that mistakes are part of learning.
Good point. Okay, that covers the key building blocks.
So as we wrap up this look at Kiyosaki's unfair advantage, maybe the final thought to leave listeners with is this.
Before.
Kiyosaki's core message is really a challenge. It's saying the old financial playbook, it might be outdated for today's world.
Question everything you thought you knew about money.
Pretty much. Question your assumptions about security, wealth, how money works, and seriously consider that maybe, just maybe, the biggest unfair advantage you can get is through dedicated financial education.
Learning the rules of the game.
Yeah. Understanding these principles, even if they seem counterintuitive at first, could be the absolute first step to taking real control of your financial future, to seeing opportunities where others just see problems or uncertainty.
Because, as he keeps saying,
Knowledge truly is real money. The understanding itself is the most valuable asset.